Hello again, welcome back to Asgard, and welcome to a brand new Little Talks for Tales. It has been a little while. I have been actively working on the pack. It takes a while, because of course it is just a spare time pack. But I've got a lot to show you guys today. We're going to go ahead and jump into it. We'll primarily be focusing on agriculture. We will be talking about some facets of in-game. So just a heads up, but it's not really spoilerish necessarily, just showing off one of the multi-block engines. If you're on the Discord, you have probably already seen some of this stuff, but some of it will be new to you. So I get a lot of questions. By the way, I just want to make a side note. I get a lot of questions about this pack every other day, generally, and various questions. Is it still in development? Yes. When's the next Little Talks? Whenever I get around to it. Various different things. But if you want more consistent updates, I do suggest you pop on the Discord, because that's where I tend to post everything. Because making a video, a lot of the stuff that I work on doesn't really necessitate a video. But that being said, today we are going to be talking a bit about agriculture within Tales, because it has been a very big focal point of pack development for me, in addition to a number of other things that I feel like often gets neglected within packs. Some of the big things that I wanted within Tales, I know I've mentioned this a few times, but I wanted a pack where automation is different, and not everything needs to be automated, right? We don't have costs that are in like the millions of items. I don't feel like that really is an expert experience. I think that's just a grindy experience. I don't want something where singularities are used for a lot of things. Singularities are within Tales, but they're low-cost singularities that only tie into mystical agriculture seeds. Beyond that, there's not really any singularities. So if you want to get mystical agriculture seeds, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today with that big monstrosity over there. But if you want to get mystical agriculture seeds, which I do suggest at least some of them within Tales, because some of them make your life extremely easy for certain things, but that's really the only time you're going to be making singularities. So I wanted an expert pack that didn't have a lot of millions of item crafts. I wanted it to be expert style recipes, but not the grindy aspect of it, not lots and lots of metals. You use plants as heavily, if not more heavily, within Tales as metals. Primarily using metals a lot for the tech aspects of Tales, and not so much for the bulk of Tales. I also wanted a pack where building isn't kind of just pushed off to the side until it comes time for the pack, and then just some build mods thrown in. So I've tried to make the majority of the building materials accessible early game into maybe mid game, depending. But most of them are readily accessible to you, with a lot of focus on build stuff. Now this build, of course, it's not very pretty. This is just one I threw together for this spotlight. I actually spent longer building my multi-blocks out that I was going to show you guys today than actually building this big box. I also wanted agriculture to not just be a side note, not just food, but just agriculture in general. I didn't want it to just be there to where all of Pam's Harvest Craft is available to you. You guys know I absolutely love a Pam's Harvest Craft. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I'm hoping potentially that Tales will fix that for some people, because it has seen a lot of love, which we're going to be showing off a little bit today. But I didn't want agriculture to just be get food and get basic resources and set up a tree farm, and that just be everything that you need. And going for, say, one food, the best food in the game right out the gate. That's not the case within Tales. You cannot do that. You have to basically tier up your food. It's a process that you have to work towards. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. I also wanted a pack that automation was a little bit different. We don't have XNAT, we don't have AE2, we don't have all that stuff, But if we tab over to here, managing your items, we have an entire tab here that's focused around ways that you can manage your items within Tales, ways that you can store items, transfer items, your storage network, of course, which is Corporea, along with various different add-ons for Corporea, You can use luminizers for transporting your items. You can use a Abyssal item transfer system. You can use blood magic. You can use embers. You can use essentials. You can use nature's aura. You have a lot of different options here. You have rats. You have golems. A lot of different options for managing your items. I still have to set requirements for some of these quests. That's some of what I've been doing, is going through adding, because this doesn't really make sense. You're not going to be able to, as soon as you start the game, make golems, so I need to do requirements for a lot of that kind of stuff. And then I also wanted a pack where there is tech. You can generate some RF, you have prodigy tech, you have mystical mechanics, you have embers, you have pyrotech, but they're not over-the-top tech mods. Basic Minecraft isn't a high-tech experience, and I didn't want Tales to be a high-tech experience. I don't tend to like super high-tech experiences. So I've tried to make tech interesting and new and fun for you guys, and it's not kind of the same tech mods going into it. But that being said, let's start talking a little bit about agriculture. So agriculture is a whole lot different within Tales. That includes not just getting crops, but also your trees, your various different resources from crops. Also cloth is totally different. Wool and string are not universally applicable to every type of cloth making within Tales. So you're going to have various different cloths. You have string, which isn't used as heavily as some other things. You have wool, you have cotton, you have jute, you have silk, you have spider silk, and then you can go further and process that down into magical silk, and you're doing some spinning wheel stuff to make kind of infused threads and things. Initially you start out with just a basic spinning wheel, and then which is the atom spinning wheel, and then later on you can upgrade to the bewitchment spinning wheel, which is where you can start kind of infusing magic into your threads and things. So cloth creation, totally overhauled. Making paper is different. Making very basic things, which we're going to talk a little bit about, that is totally different. Also, certain things that generally you have really easy access to, which I find to be a bit OP, such as mob farms, are a bit more gated into the pack. A lot of little things like that I felt like needed to be fixed, either because I didn't like base Minecraft's version, or I just didn't like the modded take on it. I've tried to kind of revamp that and give you guys a bit more of a unique experience as far as that goes. Also, when it comes to agriculture, some types of passives are farmed a little bit differently than normal. And of course, I have shown off the shearing, the runic shearing from Roots in a prior episode. So do expect to kind of keep some hostels around that you're going to be shearing off of. So, for example, spiders to get your spider silk, stuff like that. As well as various different passives that you're going to want to keep on hand within Tales. Progressively more and more. Now, Tales, it does have chunk loaders. It has weirding gadgets. They are set to a 1 chunk radius. That way you can kind of just spot chunk specific things that you do want to load. Of course, they're available early game, so it's not something that you really have to spend a whole lot of time or wait long into the pack to unlock chunk loading. But that being said, don't think within Tales that you have to chunk load everything, because like I said, this is not a pack where you need billions of items. It's more about having a wide variety of items. For example, whenever I think about, say, like a big wizard or witch's kind of garden that they keep for herbs and things, I think of a large variety of items, but not necessarily like this huge farmland filled with like 9x9s of every crop. I don't think about that. So expect to want to keep a lot of variety on hand, but don't expect to need to chunk load and set up auto farms for every single crop. There's certain things that you will want to automate. For example, Botania runes. You'll want to have those automated and at least easier to craft. You don't necessarily need like hundreds of them. You might, because air rune is used pretty heavily within doing your corporea system, so depending, you may want quite a bit of automation in terms of air runes and different runes, though there are some mobs that can actually drop those runes once you reach like late mid game. Basically, some of the Lycanites mobs around Alfheim can drop various different runes. Now, that being said, the Gaia Guardian Mark II has had its rune drops removed. So you don't expect to just farm Gaia Guardian Mark II to get your runes, because you cannot do that. Also things like Dragonstone, Pixie Dust, because you'll be fighting the Mark II Gaia before you go to Alfheim. So that's kind of a balancing thing. It's also kind of just to, just to prevent you from farming your runes that way. But that being said, there are some added drops to various bosses and stuff. I know I'm just kind of standing around, but that's kind of a talking sort of thing. But we're going to show some stuff off here in just a moment. But yeah, so don't think that you have to automate everything, and don't think that you have to have automatic farms for every single crop, because there is a very, very large amount of crops. Because I have integrated Agricraft, and I'm still integrating Agricraft, because I decided it would be a great idea to make it possible so that you can farm all flowers and whatnot in Agricraft, and even scale them up to 10/10/10s. So I'm still going through and adding those, but at least as far as basic crops and magical crops, those are implemented. But there is a massive amount of things that you can farm within Tails. A lot of those things you don't necessarily have to farm unless you're just going for true completion, which we'll kind of show that off here in just a little bit. But not everything is something that you need automated. And in some cases, things, for example, that are crafted on the gem cutter table, which is like your staves and certain things related to Arcane Archives storage. Basically, the gem cutter table is where you go for a lot of those really fine crafts. For example, making those delicate wands and making those delicate pieces, those gold kind of rune inscribed pieces for Arcane Archives. That's what the gem cutter table's for. So you're never going to be able to automate a lot of that stuff. And the reason being is because it's very delicate metalworking, and I don't think that with the level of tech within this pack, you'd never be able to just make it in any certain machine, So that's more hands-on, delicate work that you'll kind of have to do yourself. I had debated about adding a modular machine for it, but I was like, nope, I think I want it to be hands-on. So there's certain things that you're not going to be able to automate within Tails. But that being said, once again, it's not really a pack. Don't go into Tails thinking, I need to automate all these things, because that's not the way Tails is. Like I've mentioned before, it's a different take on an expert pack instead of just being lots of items, singularities and all that. It's not that. It's more combat, immersion, magic, doing automation different ways, things like that, that are going to make it, I think, a unique experience for you guys. Now on to some agriculture related stuff. Let's actually do something within this. So within PAMs, for starters, I have removed duplicates. Okay, this is something that always bugs me when I come across it in packs, is when I have like 5 different blackberries and they're all farmed different. One will be a bush and one will be a tree and one will be a crop. I don't like that. So I've removed duplicates and changed them to something totally different. They're going to have totally different uses. So for example, in the case of starfruit, I have starfruit from extra trees, and I also have starfruit from PAMs. So I have gutted the PAM starfruit. It still works the same way. But I've kept the extra. In most cases, the food related stuff is kept from extra trees. So do expect to be doing tree, bee, flower breeding, all that stuff, because it will be required, as I mentioned before, to some degree. But if you're just going for getting through the progression, you don't really necessarily have to do all the extra trees or anything, but it does help, because as you want better ones, they take better wood. Wood that's more susceptible to being able to channel magic and stuff. So you do have to upgrade your wood types. If you want to make better food, all the food is painstakingly gated to where it takes some levels of progression, some levels of work to unlock better foods. So, for example, pepper. Pepper is used in a lot of things, right? You're not going to be able to get pepper for a good long while. So you're going to be going through kind of, and I do have quests in place to kind of help you along that journey, to kind of help out with what foods are actually craftable at different times. This pack does have cooking for blockheads. However, it's not as useful as you might expect. I'll go ahead and tell you, it's not as useful as you might expect, because I don't like crafting recipes just being stick all this stuff on a crafting table and poof, here comes this item that should have been baked and it's not baked. So I have revamped food, and we're going to be taking a look at that. But back to starfruit. So we have the extra trees, starfruit, and then we have palpu fruit, which of course is a reference to Kingdom Hearts. I have a lot of reference to different things that I enjoy within the fruits and whatnot. Also some kind of made up fruits and things that I thought were kind of cool. So we do have palpu fruit. Also avocados. I have 2 different avocados. So I have hist fruit, which of course Elder Scrolls reference there. Which this fruit, if it was actually Elder Scrolls, you would never want to eat this. You would never want to eat it. And then over here we have the Karima, which of course is a reference to the Tales series, which of course is where the name for this pack came from. So we have these various different fruits that, because I didn't want multiples, but I also didn't want to cut out fruits for the most part. Now there is a few Pam's fruit trees that are completely gutted. They are not within the pack. Those 4 are the paper bark sapling, because it never made sense to me to just pull paper off of a tree. Also the spiderweb sapling, pulling string off of a tree. Also, I've got other ways to make string. Also the maple syrup sapling, because I hate that system for maple syrup. As somebody that actually taps trees, you don't just go up and slap the tree and then maple syrup comes falling out. So I've gutted that tree. And also cinnamon, because that's not how cinnamon is made. So I have gutted those 4 trees entirely. They do not exist within Tales. There are some crops that got gutted just because it felt excessive, but for the most part there's various different changes to the crops and different uses for those. So expect a variety of new stuff, and everything has a particular use. That's generally one big complaint about Pam's Harvestcraft, is that you'll have a recipe and it'll have like 50, everything's ore dictionary. So you'll have like, you can use any kind of meat, you can use any kind of vegetable, you can use any kind of flour item, so I've tried to give most things a purpose within Tales. So recipes in general, and it's not just Pam's, but all food recipes have been gone through, and many of them changed. Some food names have been changed to make them a little bit more lore friendly into Tales, or a little bit more lore friendly with their ingredients that went into them. Just a lot of work in that regard. Also, as far as talking about crops, I have gone through the painstaking process, as I mentioned before, of adding in various different integrations. So for example, Atom seeds and Midnight seeds, these can be planted. Well, I never changed that one. I bet I didn't change this one either. I have to do that. That's something else I should mention. Within Tales, most of the crops, I did miss a couple here, but the majority of the crops, there are some special case crops that don't work this way, but most of the crops will grow in any light level. So they can be dark or they can be bright light, because if you've ever had a garden, like in real life, you know that generally it seems like your plants grow the fastest at night, because plants do require kind of that rest period. Having light on them all the time, generally not super great on them. So I have made it so that all crops can grow basically 24/7. That being said, all crops did receive a slight growth debuff as far as their speed goes, but if you set up, say, sprinklers or something like that, you can kind of offset that through the use of sprinklers. Most of them can grow in the dark, though, so you don't have to worry about making your farm super bright. You can have a farm out in the dark, and it's still going to grow. When the sun comes up, it's still going to grow. If it's dark, sadly, there's no way to really balance it to say that it needs light, but it still grows in the dark. There's no way to really do that, so I just made it just any light level, because generally people don't just have pitch dark areas anyways, you know. And if they want a pitch dark farm, more power to them. I try to give you a little bit more freedom as far as the way you want to build and decorate, without being too restrictive on how you will be setting up your farms. You don't have to have torches all around it and all that. So if there's a dark spot in your farm, don't worry, your crops can still grow. But you can see that in this example, emmer seeds from Adam, they can grow with Agricraft. They can be scaled to 10, 10, 10. Over here, unstable seeds from Midnight. We can grow these here. And you can see I've made them kind of go through the growth cycle. Now, unfortunately, certain things, like, for example, the blade shrooms from Midnight, when I tried to put their growth patterns into the Agricraft crop sticks, I tried cross and I tried hatch, but it basically would set the crop on top of this until it was at its final stage. It would be like this weirdly shaped, kind of stretched out mushroom that was growing on top of the crop sticks until it reached its final stage. So certain things I had to change. I think I used white spore textures for its growth, but this one still does the unstable fruit where it kind of floats away, which makes collecting it quite interesting. And it can produce all different colors through this. So, oh wait, there we go. You can see I got a little bit of green and I got a little bit of blue. It's like I think a 30% chance for each color. So in some cases you will get a couple of those from the unstable seeds. And then the emmer seeds work just like the Adam emmer. So I've been going through and adding all the different crops that you could think of to Agricraft. So you can farm to your heart's content. Like I said, it's not really required that you go super crazy and go 10, 10, 10 on everything, but it is there. And as I've mentioned before, Agricraft is quite a bit harder. There are weeds. I have no plans on disabling them, no matter how many people complain about weeds, which they tend to do in every pack that has weeds, but I'm not changing that. Also, the stat breeding is a bit more difficult than normal because you can't just set it there like a one crop and just let it spread and it just grows in strength. You do have to do ideally the 4 crop system, so you have one spot in the middle where 4 different crops are breeding into to get your stat increases, and you do lose a little bit of stats whenever it crossbreeds. For me, all that stuff is great mechanics with an Agricraft that tends to get disabled, which I always hate seeing. So do expect a little bit harder Agricraft breeding, but for those of you that do like crops like myself, do expect to have an absolute ton of things that you can farm and that are available to you. You like my spider pet? My big spider? I love that mod, by the way. I love that mod. That is escape and run parasites. Hint, hint, wink, wink. But yeah, so a lot of work has went into the Agricraft. I know this, and I know this floor is like weird because it basically goes up if you're trying to place blocks on it, and I just didn't care. This was just a quick like toss-up build for the showcase today. But yeah, so generally if you can find something that you can grow, do expect that you can grow it on Agricraft crops, as well as certain things that you wouldn't normally expect to be able to grow. You can grow within Agricraft crop sticks. Now next up, let's talk about maple syrup, because I told you that I had gotten rid of the maple trees, but you can still get maple syrup because, you know, it's kind of a necessity to be able to get maple syrup. So what we can do is you need the forestry maple logs. I have, like if you take a look here, if you take a look at this mod here, this is the maple syrup mod. I just found this the other day and I was like, oh my gosh, where have you been all my life? So I totally changed maple syrup because that kind of filled a void that I really hated. Just right-clicking trees to get maple syrup. I did change the maple syrup trees to autumnal leaves and saplings and wood and stuff. I just changed the name of those. These are fine for getting maple syrup, but since I wanted to integrate everything into forestry a bit more, I went with the forestry maple and changed these over. So the tree that you're going to want to be going for is the forestry maple tree. And what we can do is we can build this up, and you can also do this with birch. Let me go ahead and mention that. Birch is what you're probably going to start with until you get up to the point where you have maple wood, which really isn't like super far in to get maple wood or anything. But you can also do birch. Birch is the lazy man's way to get syrup. You can still get it. You'll get birch syrup. But it takes, for anybody who does tap trees, you probably know this. And for those of you that don't, birch, not nearly as efficient for making syrup as maple. Now, granted, it's a different taste. I actually quite like the taste of birch syrup, but it does take a ton of birch sap to make birch syrup. So you can do it this way, but it's a whole lot less efficient to do it. And it is a different type of syrup, so do kind of keep some birch going, and do have access to that, but it's not what you're going to be using for the majority of your stuff. You will use it some, and you can use it for some recipes interchangeably with maple syrup. But what you're going to do is you're going to make yourself a tree tap, click it onto there, and put a bucket on there, and you're going to notice that syrup is going to start kind of dripping out of there. And you can do the same thing over here with, say, birch. Now, unfortunately, the maple syrup mod does not check if it's actually a tree. It just checks on the logs and that they're vertical in this case, but I can't check the blocks around it, for example. So you can do this. That's how you're going to get your maple syrup. And then once this is done, you can take it off and you're going to get like maple sap, for example. And then the way that we're going to process this down is we set up an evaporator. And by the way, there is some weird render issues. You can see that it does that. I think because normally there's smoke particles, it just does it with the maple syrup mod. I'm not going to cut the mod because of it. It only does it like certain spots. I don't know. I'll see if I can fix it, but if not, just bear in mind that that's there. So you may want to think about your placement of your evaporators a little bit. But it's not a mod that I'm going to cut just because of that, because it makes my maple syrup life so much better. So much better. Because, of course, we've got tree tapping for rubber from between lands, so definitely we want it for maple syrup, right? So then we can take our evaporator and we can fill this up with some maple syrup. And this thing can store 20 buckets, by the way, of your syrup. And then what we can do is just throw in some coal, and that's going to start evaporating. And it's going to evaporate down. That 20 buckets, I think I have it set to make... Let's see, maple syrup. I can't remember. I think I have it set to make like 20 buckets makes like 4 buckets of maple syrup, something like that. And then once you get that maple syrup into a bucket, then you can just make your maple syrup bottles. I may change that recipe. I don't know. I don't really mind having to bottle it via a bucket, but that is subject to change. I don't know. And you can take the hydrometer and right click that. You can see that this is 8% sugar. So you can see the sugar content of your syrup while it's running. So kind of a quick little mod spotlight for the maple syrup mod. Super awesome mod. Just came across it the other day and I was like, oh my gosh, I love it. So that is implemented. Also cinnamon. Let me go ahead, pop into survival here. And if we break cinnamon wood with a knife, this is the bark collecting from roots basically, that's how you're going to get cinnamon. So nothing too crazy there, but a little bit more interesting than just right clicking a cinnamon tree log and getting cinnamon. So you do get a few pieces of cinnamon per cinnamon wood, and realistically you can mass produce this stuff super easy once you get set up for it. And then let's talk about oh, and there are Karathi dates. This is the atom dates. I meant to show this. This is another changed item, so I already had dates, so I went with Karathi dates, which of course is a reference to The Witcher. Which actually, fun fact, if you want to take a look at the Karathi dates, now this is a default recipe, the glycerine Karathi date, or it's actually glycerine date with an atom. This is actually default recipe here, and I know my Grimoire of Gaia nuggets. I don't know why mods add additional gold nuggets and iron nuggets. There's a couple that do that, but in case you don't have vanilla Minecraft. But anyways, there's the glycerine Karathi date, that's default recipe. But then, if you want to make the golden Karathi date, you do have to soak that in a bit of molten gold. It's actually a little bit expensive to get your golden Karathi dates, Though I will say gold, there's some fun ways to automate that. I actually, in one of my tests, I had a gold farm that was nothing but geese, and they would lay golden eggs, and I would melt those down for gold. There's some fun ways to automate gold. Also, you can get gold via, I believe there's a shimmerstone method if you want to have a bunch of peat mummies and like for shearing, and then there's also, I think the orchid. I want to say the orchid produces gold, if I recall. And then you can take the golden Karothi and you can turn that into the enchanted golden Karothi, which you're going to be doing as you pass through Adam. And this is actually, I posted this on the Discord. This is one of the, like, oh no moments, I think. One of the first oh no moments that pop up within Tales, I think. Because if you haven't been keeping up with things, you do require that liquid gold smoothie, which you should already have that by the time you've passed through the Erebus. So super easy to make that. You need your golden Karothi. You do need a golden idol. These aren't that uncommon when you're washing your idols. You do need some golden combs from extra bees, so you do need to stay on top of that bee breeding. You need some golden thread, so you do need to stay on top of your kind of your cloth work a little bit. You need a golden goose egg, so hopefully you have a goose farm. They're not super uncommon though. Like I said, I made a farm, literally just golden goose eggs, and I was melting them down for my gold. Which actually it worked extremely well. I actually love that setup. Probably something, once I get a chance to play through this pack as a series, I'll probably be setting up. And then you also need gold pigment, so hopefully you've been doing some flower breeding. Pigment is required for various different things. It kind of replaces dyes, are kind of your early thing, and then you kind of move into pigments for some of your better, more ornate, like wands and things like that. So do expect to use some pigments. Also some various different little recipes where pigments come up. I think there's a couple like trees for their recipe where it comes up because it's kind of a magical infusion recipe, and a couple various different things. So but that is the Karothi. A little bit of a process. You do have to make a couple of those while you're in Adam, but nothing too heavily. But they do make a really good food source if you're willing to automate them. So they're actually not that expensive if you have this stuff set up. It's just basically a lot of gold, and bees. Once you have bees set up, golden combs are nothing. You do have to wash statues, so there is a little bit of exploration or trading required there. But anyways, next up, do we want to do... Let's talk about this first. So wood essence, for example. Normally within mystical agriculture, wood essence tends to be a little bit of kind of a letdown, because you get it and all you can make is like oak, dark oak, birch, spruce, acacia, and jungle, and then as well as the saplings. So within Tales, I have revamped many of the different essences: stone, wood essence, a lot of those that should be really wide open as far as what you can do with them, and they tend to be very, very minute in what you can actually do with them, and the recipes almost never tend to be changed, which always bothers me. So I have revamped wood essence. If you put forth the effort to get wood seeds, you should be repaid by something that's actually useful. So for example, there's no crafting recipe here. Instead, it is all done through the Essence Alchemizer, which this is a multi-block. In this case, it uses mana. The Essence Alchemizer actually supports a massive amount of inputs depending on which essence type that you're doing, but all of your essence crafting will be done through the Essence Alchemizer, no crafting grid. So, in the case of wood essence, if you put in 1 oak wood and you put in 8 wood essence, you're going to get 8 oak wood. Okay. And then the same is true of spruce. If you have gotten the wood, then you should be able to duplicate the wood if you have wood essence. So as you can see, there is a massive amount of wood available. So if you're building something with wood and it's something that you really don't want to have to, build a tree farm for, you can make it through this. I may add a couple other things. There was a couple things I was debating about, like the rotten wood. Some of those rotten woods from Between Lands may be allowing you to do that. You can use that for duplicating, And the same is true for stone. Certain things aren't duplication based, like for example, iron essence. You know, you don't really need to duplicate that because it only makes iron in terms of the essence alchemizer. So there wasn't a whole lot of point in allowing you to duplicate that. Now the essence alchemizer is this big monstrosity. Basically, to start into mystical agriculture, you're going to have to reach mid-game, like kind of early mid-game, which is the point where you can make your draconic energy orb. You can make your wireless, your draconic wireless energy transfer. That's really the only energy transfer system really within the pack. So you're going to be using draconic energy orb and the draconic wireless. So moving RF, super easy. It's all really magical. Draconic is a mod that almost completely got gutted, but there is a bit that's still left within the mod. Basically because I needed a or a power transfer system within Tales because I didn't have one, and everybody likes to build a draconic energy orb, right? Looks cool. So you've got to reach mid-game, get to the point where you can actually start producing some power to make your singularities. Like I said, they're not all that expensive to make. Different item counts based on the type of essence. Get to the point that you can make those. Also get to the point that you can create the essence alchemizer. This thing is a little bit of a process to make. As you can see, it's fairly big. Most of the multi-blocks within Tales are fairly big and ornate. If you want to see the inside of this, lots of stuff going on. You can see lots of Crossroads action. Crossroads does, you will be using Crossroads a lot, so learn to love it. But I will say, Flying Machine is super amazing once you get access to that. But you will need to make this big monstrosity, the Essence Alchemizer. And this thing does support various different types of input. So you can say Essentia, Mana, Energy, Life Essence, Demon Wheel, Aura. There's a side over here for there's items and fluids, and there's also Starlight, which is kind of hard to see. It's a little bit dark. I've actually got it kept at dark right now, so... Oh no, maple syrup is done. So at this point, you could just bucket it up, by the way. It's just within buckets. But once you make this big thing, there's a little bit of gating required. You do kind of have to go through some of the... Like, basically, once you hit the overworld, you kind of get to choose if you want to go to the Abyss, to the Midnight, to the Atom, to Mirvodi, or to Alfheim. A little bit of a process for each one, not super time-consuming. Once you get through kind of the overworld progression. And so you will need to kind of go to a few different places. You'll have to go to the Midnight. You'll have to go to... let's see. You'll have to go to the Midnight. You'll have to go to, I think, Alfheim, maybe? I think, yeah. And, I don't remember. You have to go to, like, a couple places to build this thing initially. Now, another nice feature about this is that you can actually upgrade this. So, the Essentia Smeltery that's in here, you can upgrade that. So, for example, if we went with, let's actually just go to Smeltery here. You start out with needing the Essentia Smeltery, but then you can, say, go to the Thaumium, the Void Metal, the Mithrilium, the Adamanite, and the Mythmanite. You can upgrade these, and they scale up. This one, you only get, say, 8 wood each craft. But once you get up to, say, the Mythmanite, which is in-game, to be fair, but once you get up to the Mythmanite, you're producing a stack of wood per craft. So 1 oak wood and 8 wood essence gives you a stack of oak wood. So as you scale that out, you can get a lot better outputs. And that's not just exclusive to wood essence, but you're going to get better ingot output, you're going to get better stone output, and so on. So it is worth kind of bearing in mind, because this thing is available really, really early on, and realistically you could progress on to the Thaumium Essentia Smeltery pretty quickly. Void Metal a bit later on, Mithrilium a bit later on, kind of at the start of late game, and then you can get Adamanite kind of at the back end of late game, and then Mythmanite into the end game. And yeah, that's kind of how essences work. Kind of a little spoiler of that. So no crafting table. There's also, as I've mentioned before, there is no Inferium farming. I hate Inferium farming. There's no Inferium farming whatsoever within Tales. So it's not even a thing. Or, well, I should say it's not there's no inferium compression within tails. So seeds, they don't require anything even remotely related to inferium to craft those seeds. So it is a lot different. I hate seeing that mod in its default state. I cannot stand it. So don't expect mystical agriculture to be anything like you're used to within Tails. Okay, we're going to talk about that big monstrosity back there here in a second. But let's go ahead and do something kind of fun. Let's make a cake in Tails. Oh, but unfortunately we don't have time in this episode to make our cake. But a little sneak peek here of what to look forward to. Next episode, because I talked for a while, of course these little talks, I get to get on here and just kind of ramble, which is nice because I've kind of kept Tails under wraps pretty heavily as I've developed it. So it's nice to be able to get onto here and talk to a certain degree without giving away too many spoilers, because I want to keep it kind of spoiler free, because there's a lot there's a lot that's went into Tails, to say the least. But next episode we will make a cake for starters, go over the process of making a cake, to kind of give you a little taste of kind of what to expect with the agriculture changes. Heavy changes to agriculture. And we will also talk a little bit about the different quest tabs. So we'll go through the kind of the quest book, just basically talking about the various chapters for the most part, show you a few of the quest tabs there, and also talk a little bit about the end game, how the end game works, and what true completion truly means within Tails. A couple notes that I forgot to mention while I was that I noticed when I was editing this footage. First up, for example, like say curry leaf, all your crops, for the most part, are going to be obtained through mutation within Agricraft. So if you want curry leaf, you have to get mustard seed, and you have to get spice leaf. Spice leaf is actually obtained within, Alfheim, I believe. So you can get spice leaf from there. That's the way I gated a lot of this, is you can't get curry leaf until you went to Alfheim. Mustard seed is created with beans and sesame seeds, and beans are made from sugarcane and rice. Rice you can find, where can you find it? Somewhere's about. Sesame seed is water chestnut, which is from Mirvodi, and rice is, where is rice from? But so most of your Agricraft is going to be gated, thus gating your foods as to what you can actually access based on the ingredients. So, as I said before, and I'll say it again, a lot of work has went into food to make it balanced. So you can't rush best quality foods. Starting out, you're going to have kind of dinky foods, and then you're going to refine that food making process if that's something that you want to do. It's not heavily required within Tails that you do a lot with Agricraft or agriculture, assuming that you're not going for true completion. If you want true completion, you're going to have to do everything. But if you just want to get through progression and you don't care about farming, then I guess you can do that. But I will say Pam's is drastically different than normal. Also, something to kind of look forward to. You can thank Purely Platonic and Xavian for this. If you hate it, you can thank them for it. But Xavian the other day and Purely brought up doing some custom weeds within Agricraft, which is actually something I hadn't really considered, and I have since implemented it. So there are, in addition to normal weeds, there are other types of weeds to kind of look out for within Agricraft. So there's certain ones that will attack your magical crops because they're grown on a totally different soil. There's certain, they're kind of like Vidium weeds that come up that will try to attack your Thaumcraft crops. Oh, my spider despawned. I did log off and log back in, so I was in my other world. But there is certain weeds that specifically target, for example, your Thaumcraft V stuff. If it's not, if everything's not planted, then weeds will try to crop up in those. There's also certain weeds, as Xavian suggested, that are just extremely fast to grow, but they don't actually overtake crops. there's certain weeds that crop up on mycelium. And so there's quite a few different kind of custom weeds to look forward to kind of spice up your Agricraft adventure. I loved whenever they suggested it. I was like, oh my god, I love that idea, and something I hadn't thought about. So I did get those integrated in, and so there is extra weeds to look forward to as well. So hopefully you love weeds. I love weeds. I think it's a great mechanic, personally. So just a couple things that I wanted to mention before we ended out this episode. So tomorrow we will be posting part 2. It's already recorded. It's already edited, except for the intro. So it'll be a 2-part thing for this discussion. So next episode we'll go over those points that I mentioned, as well as just a couple other things, and yeah, go through the quest book. And discuss a bit of in-game. So if you're wanting to avoid those kind of spoilers, just a forewarning, that will be in part 2, but it will be after we make the cake. So if you want to see the cake, you can tune in for that, and then after that we'll discuss a little bit about in-game, but not super spoilery or anything like that. So but anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. If you did, as always, be sure and hit that like button and go ahead and subscribe if you're not already, to stay updated with when new videos come out. And once again, if you're not in the Discord, I do suggest it if you are wanting to get more kind of up-to-date information about Tales, kind of, or what I'm working on, stuff like that, a little bit more regularly, then that's the place to go. Also, I want to just say a big thank you to everyone that's kind of been supportive along the process of creating this pack. Chances are, next pack that I do, once Tales is done, and after I take a nice extensive break, I want to get Tales done, but then as soon as Tales is done, as far as my spare time, I'm going to be playing some Dark Souls, probably, because it's been a while since I played some Dark Souls, and I might play through some modded Skyrim as well. Not to mention I have a backlist of things that I would love to play that I just haven't had time to play. Nocturne and Catherine both got remakes on the Switch, and I started them, but I just haven't really had time to play them. 2 of my personal favorite games ever, and I just haven't had time. So after Tales is done, I'm going to be taking a short break, but then I will probably make a pack. It'll probably be a little bit faster than Tales, we'll see. So I've learned a lot, and of course the rewrites didn't help things at all either. So but yeah, so anyways, a big thank you to everyone that's kind of supported the pack creation and the channel and stuff during this time, and I hope to see you guys for part 2 tomorrow. So anyways, until then, as always, do take care, stay safe, and I'll see you guys then.